When I walked out of my father's hospital room after saying goodbye to him for the last time, I never imagined that would only be the beginning of a nightmare that would change my life forever. My name is Richard. I'm 52 years old, and for 3 decades I believed I had built the perfect family, but that day everything crumbled in a matter of minutes. My father had died the night before. Cancer, fast, brutal, devastating. I spent the entire night by his side at the hospital, holding his hand as he took his last breath. I came home mid-morning, completely destroyed, but still trying to hold myself together for my family, for my wife Sandra, and our 9-year-old daughter Emma. Walking into the house, I expected to find comfort. I expected a hug, soft words, maybe a hot cup of coffee. But the house was silent. A heavy, strange silence. Sandra was in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone, not even looking at me when I walked past the doorway. "Sandra," I called out, my voice still hoarse from crying so much at the hospital. She barely lifted her eyes for a second, as if I were a stranger, and went back to typing. "No, I'm sorry. No, how are you holding up?" Nothing. I felt something was wrong, but I was too exhausted to confront it at that moment. I walked up the stairs toward Emma's room. I wanted to see my little girl, hold her, feel that there was still something pure and true in my life. But when I reached the hallway, I heard a muffled sound, a sound that sent chills down my spine, knocking, weak, desperate, coming from inside our bedroom. I pushed the door open with force and walked in. The room was empty, but the knocking continued. My heart started racing. I followed the sound to the walk-in closet built into the wall. The knocking was coming from there. "Emma?" I yelled, pulling the closet door open with force, and there she was. My daughter curled up on the floor, her knees pulled against her chest, her face red and wet with tears. She was shaking. Her eyes were wide with fear, and when she saw me, she threw herself into my arms with a force that almost knocked me down. "Daddy! Daddy!" she sobbed, clinging to my neck. I held her tight, my entire body trembling with rage and confusion. "What happened, sweetheart? Who did this to you?" Emma pulled away slightly, still crying, and pointed toward the bedroom door. I followed the direction of her finger. Sandra was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, without any expression of guilt or regret, just coldness. "Was it you?" I asked, my voice coming out lower than I expected, almost a whisper of shock. Sandra shrugged. "She was unbearable, screaming, crying for you. I had things to do." For a second, I thought I had heard wrong. "You locked our daughter in the closet because she was crying?" "She needs to learn to control herself," Sandra replied, as if she were talking about the weather. "You weren't here. Someone had to deal with her." I felt my blood boil. "My father died, Sandra. She's scared. She's a child." "And what am I, Richard? Your maid, your babysitter?" Sandra raised her voice, finally showing some emotion, but it was anger. "You spend the entire night away, leave me alone here and expect me to deal with a hysterical child." I looked at Emma, still clinging to me, and then back at the woman I had married 28 years ago. And suddenly, as if a curtain had been ripped away, I started seeing things I had ignored for years. Small signs, coldness, impatience, cutting remarks, contempt. "Since when are you like this?" I asked, more to myself than to her. Sandra rolled her eyes. "Since always, Richard. You were just too busy being the good dad and the good son to notice." That hit me like a punch to the stomach. But before I could respond, Emma tugged at my shirt. "Daddy, I'm scared of her." Those words changed everything. I picked her up in my arms and walked out of the room, passing right by Sandra without saying a word. I went down the stairs, placed Emma on the living room couch, and knelt in front of her, holding her tiny, cold hands. "Has this happened before, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Emma hesitated, biting her lower lip. Then slowly she nodded her head. My world collapsed again. How many times? I don't know, she whispered. A lot. I closed my eyes, trying to control the wave of fury rising in my chest. Why didn't you ever tell me? Mommy said if I told you, you wouldn't believe me. Emma replied, her voice small and broken. She said you would be mad at me. I opened my eyes and looked at my daughter, that innocent child who had been manipulated and terrorized by her own mother. And in that moment, I made a decision. Sandra came down the stairs slowly, with that expression of superiority I now clearly recognized. All right, Richard, you've played your hero dad role. Now get back to reality and... I want a divorce. I cut her off. The silence that followed was deafening. Sandra blinked, as if she wasn't sure she had heard correctly. What? She finally said. You heard me, I want a divorce, and I'm going to fight for full custody of Emma. Sandra started laughing, a cold, calculating laugh. You're not going anywhere with me, Richard. You think any judge is going to give you custody? I'm her mother. I stay home, take care of the house. I'm the stable figure. You work all day. Good luck. She was confident, too confident, and I knew why. During all these years, I was the provider. I worked, paid the bills, gave her everything she wanted, and she had used that to create a narrative where she was the victim and I was the absent one. But Sandra didn't know one thing. My father, before dying, had left me something that would change everything. The days following my father's funeral, the tension at home was palpable. Sandra pretended our conversation about divorce had never happened. She moved around the house as if nothing had changed, but I saw the calculation behind every move she made. She was planning something. So was I. Emma stuck to me like glue. She didn't want to be alone with Sandra, and I couldn't blame her. I started working from home, reorganized my schedule to be present as much as possible. And each day that passed, I saw more signs of what my daughter had endured in silence. 3 days after the funeral, I received a call from the family attorney. My father had left a will. I knew he had some savings, maybe the house where he lived, but I didn't expect much beyond that. He had always been discreet about his finances. When I arrived at the attorney's office, I was greeted by an older man in an impeccable grey suit with a thick folder on the desk. Mr. Morrison, I'm sorry for your loss, he said, shaking my hand. Your father was a remarkable man. Thank you, I replied, still not understanding why he seemed so formal. Let's get straight to the point, he continued, opening the folder. Your father left you the entirety of his estate. This includes the property in Westfield, the stocks he accumulated over the years, and the investments he made over the last 20 years. I nodded, waiting for the numbers. The attorney slid a paper in my direction. When I saw the amount, my heart stopped. $3,400,000. Is this correct? I asked, my voice failing. Perfectly correct, the attorney confirmed. Your father was a very intelligent investor. He lived simply, but accumulated a considerable fortune, and he wanted everything to go to you. I left that office in shock. My father, the man who always wore the same shirts for years, who drove an old car, who never flaunted anything, was a millionaire. And he never told me. But then, I realized why. He knew. Somehow he knew that if Sandra found out, she would never leave me alone. He was protecting me, and now, even after death, he was still taking care of me. When I got home that night, Sandra was in the living room watching television. She barely looked at me. Where were you? She asked, without real interest. Handling my father's affairs, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. She shrugged and turned her attention back to the screen. I went upstairs, checked on Emma, who was sleeping peacefully, and then went to the home office I kept. There, I called a divorce attorney, one of the best in the city. The next day, I started documenting everything. I took photos of the closet where Emma had been locked. I noted every time she showed fear of her mother. I discreetly talked to neighbors, Emma's teacher, anyone who might have noticed something. And what I discovered made me even angrier. Emma's teacher told me that on several occasions, Emma had shown signs of stress at school. Once, she had wet her pants because she was afraid to ask to go to the bathroom. When the teacher asked why, Emma said her mother got angry when she asked for things. Neighbors mentioned that when I was at work, they sometimes heard Emma crying loudly, but they thought it was just a child's tantrum. No one imagined what was really happening. Every piece of information I gathered was another piece of the puzzle. Sandra wasn't just negligent, she was cruel. And she had hidden this from me for years. 2 weeks after the funeral, I finally served the divorce papers. I hired a process server to deliver them personally while I was with Emma at the park. When I returned home, Sandra was sitting at the kitchen table, the papers spread out in front of her face red with anger. "What the hell is this?" she screamed as soon as she saw me. "Divorce," I replied calmly, "and petition for sole custody." Sandra stood up, the chair scraping against the floor violently. "Are you insane? You think you're going to take my daughter away from me?" "Our daughter," I corrected. "And yes, I am." "With what money, Richard?" she laughed, but it was a nervous laugh now. "You're going to pay for a lawyer, you're going to pay alimony, you're going to pay for the house. You'll go broke before you get anything." I could have told her about the inheritance at that moment, but I decided not to give her that information. Not yet. I let her think I was bluffing. "We'll see," was all I said. The following months were hell. Sandra fought tooth and nail. She hired an attorney and started building a narrative where she was the dedicated mother and I was the absent father. She cried at preliminary hearings, talked about how she had sacrificed her career to take care of the family, about how I was never present. But I had evidence. I had testimonies. I had Emma, who, with the help of a child therapist, finally managed to talk about the years of emotional abuse she had suffered. And I had resources now, resources Sandra couldn't imagine. When the main hearing finally arrived, Sandra walked in confident. She was dressed impeccably, with that victim air she had perfected. But when my attorney started presenting the evidence, I saw her confidence crumble. Photos, testimonies, school records, therapist reports, and then the final bomb. My attorney presented a recording. I had installed security cameras at home after discovering what was happening, and one of them had captured Sandra in a moment of rage, yelling at Emma and locking her in the closet again while I was in a work meeting. The judge watched in silence. When the video ended, he looked at Sandra with a clear expression of disapproval. "Mrs. Morrison," he said, his voice firm, "do you have anything to say in your defense?" Sandra tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. She looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw fear in her eyes. Real fear. The judge granted me sole custody. Sandra was given supervised visitation rights, and only if she agreed to therapy. She left that courtroom destroyed, and I felt a wave of relief that almost knocked me down. When I got home that night, Emma ran to me. "Daddy, what happened?" I picked her up and hugged her tight. "You're safe now, sweetheart. Forever." And for the first time in months, I saw my daughter smile for real. But I knew this was just the beginning. Sandra wouldn't give up that easily. She had always been calculating, manipulative, and I had a feeling she was already planning her next move. What I didn't know was just how far she would go to try to destroy me. The weeks following the custody ruling were surprisingly quiet. Too quiet. Sandra had moved out of the house, taken her things, and disappeared into silence. She didn't contest the ruling, didn't file any appeals, didn't even show up for her supervised visits. It was as if she had simply vanished from our lives. Emma started to relax. Color returned to her cheeks. She laughed more, played more, started sleeping through the night without nightmares. I enrolled her in counseling, made sure she knew she was safe, that what happened wasn't her fault. And slowly, day by day, I watched my daughter come back to life. I should have known it was too easy. I should have known Sandra was planning something, but I was too focused on helping Emma heal to see the storm coming. It started with a phone call from my attorney. "Richard, we have a problem," he said, his voice tense. "Sandra filed a motion claiming you manipulated the court. She's saying the evidence was fabricated, that you coached Emma, that the recordings were edited. She's asking for a new hearing and temporary custody pending investigation." My blood ran cold. Can she do that? She can try, and she has a new attorney, a very expensive one. Someone who specializes in family law and has a reputation for winning impossible cases. "How is she paying for that?" I asked, genuinely confused. Sandra hadn't worked in years. She had no income, no savings that I knew of. "That's what concerns me," my attorney replied. "Someone is funding her, and they have deep pockets." Over the next few days, I did some digging, and what I found made my stomach turn. Sandra had reconnected with her family, specifically her older brother Marcus, a successful real estate developer who had never liked me. He had always thought Sandra married beneath her, that I wasn't good enough for his sister, and now he was bankrolling her legal campaign to destroy me. The new hearing was set for 3 weeks out, and in those 3 weeks, Sandra's new attorney launched a full assault. He filed motions questioning my character, my fitness as a parent, my financial stability. He demanded psychological evaluations, home inspections, interviews with Emma's teachers and doctors. He was trying to overwhelm me, bury me in legal paperwork and fees. But I had something he didn't expect. I had my father's inheritance, and I was willing to spend every penny to protect my daughter. I hired a private investigator. I wanted to know everything about Sandra's new life, her activities, who she was seeing, what she was doing. And what he uncovered was explosive. Sandra had moved in with Marcus and his wife. She was living in their luxury penthouse, driving their cars, spending their money. But more importantly, she was lying. She had told her brother that I was abusive, that I had threatened her, that I had turned Emma against her. She had painted herself as the victim of domestic violence, a mother torn from her child by a manipulative, controlling husband. None of it was true, but Marcus believed her, and he was using his considerable resources to help her fight back. The investigator also found something else. Sandra had started dating someone, a man named Derek, who had a criminal record. Assault, domestic violence, drug possession. He was living in Marcus's penthouse too, right there with Sandra. When my attorney presented this information at the hearing, Sandra's face went white. Her expensive lawyer tried to minimize it, tried to say it was irrelevant, that Sandra's personal life had no bearing on her fitness as a mother. But the judge disagreed. "Mrs. Morrison," the judge said, his voice stern, "you are asking this court to reconsider its custody ruling while you are living with a man who has a documented history of violence and drug abuse. You filed motions claiming Mr. Morrison is unfit, yet you expose yourself to a dangerous individual. Can you explain this contradiction?" Sandra stammered, looked at her attorney, but no words came out. Her brother Marcus, sitting in the back row, looked furious. Not at Sandra, but at me, as if this was somehow my fault. The judge denied Sandra's motion. He upheld the original custody ruling and added a new condition. Sandra could not have any unsupervised contact with Emma as long as she was in a relationship with Derek or living with him. Sandra stood up, her face red with rage and humiliation. She pointed at me across the courtroom. "This isn't over, Richard. You think you've won, but you haven't. I will get my daughter back, and you will pay for what you've done to me." Security had to escort her out. Marcus followed, glaring at me with pure hatred, and I realized that this battle was far from over. Sandra had resources now. She had family backing her, and she had nothing left to lose. When I got home that night, I sat Emma down. She was only 9 years old, but she was smart. She knew something was wrong. "Daddy, is Mummy coming back?" she asked, her voice small and scared. I looked at my daughter, this brave little girl who had survived so much, and I made her a promise. "Not unless you want her to, sweetheart. And even then, only when it's safe. I will never let anyone hurt you again. Never." Emma hugged me tight. "I'm glad you're my daddy." Those words meant more to me than any court ruling, any amount of money, any victory. Because in that moment, I knew I had done the right thing. I had protected my child. I had stood up to the person who was supposed to love her most and had instead caused her so much pain. But I also knew Sandra wasn't done. She would keep fighting. She would keep trying to hurt me, to hurt Emma, to win at any cost, and I had to be ready for whatever came next, because this wasn't just about custody anymore. This was about survival, and I would do whatever it took to keep my daughter safe. The months that followed were a constant battle. Sandra didn't give up. Every few weeks, there was a new motion, a new complaint, a new attempt to drag me back into court. Her brother Marcus was funding everything, and his pockets seemed endless. But I had resources too, and more importantly, I had the truth on my side. Emma continued to thrive. She joined the school soccer team, made new friends, started smiling again. Her therapist said she was making remarkable progress. The nightmares had stopped. She no longer flinched when someone raised their voice. She was becoming the happy, confident child she should have always been. But Sandra's shadow still loomed over us. She had stopped showing up for supervised visits entirely, claiming they were humiliating and beneath her dignity. Her attorney tried to spin it as my fault, saying I had created an environment that made Sandra uncomfortable. The judge didn't buy it. Then one day, everything changed. I received a call from my investigator. "Richard, you need to hear this," he said, his voice urgent. "I've been monitoring Sandra's activities like you asked. Last night, she and Derek got into a fight at Marcus's penthouse. Neighbors called the police. Derek was arrested for assault and destruction of property." "Is Sandra okay?" I asked, not because I cared about her, but because I needed to know if this would affect Emma. "Physically, yes, but here's the interesting part. When the police arrived, they found drugs in the apartment. Cocaine, a lot of it. Derek is being charged with possession with intent to distribute. And Sandra was there when it happened." My heart raced. Was she arrested? No. She claimed she didn't know about the drugs, that they were all Derek's. Marcus backed her up, said Derek must have brought them in without anyone knowing. But the police report notes that the drugs were found in multiple locations throughout the penthouse, including Sandra's bedroom. This was exactly what I needed. I immediately contacted my attorney, and we filed an emergency motion to terminate Sandra's visitation rights entirely, citing the drug incident and her continued poor judgment. We argued that Sandra was putting herself in dangerous situations and that any contact with Emma, even supervised, posed a risk. The hearing was scheduled quickly. Sandra showed up looking defeated. Her expensive clothes couldn't hide the exhaustion in her eyes, the trembling in her hands. Marcus wasn't with her this time. According to my investigator, he and his wife had kicked Sandra out of their penthouse after the drug incident. They wanted nothing to do with the scandal. Sandra was now living in a small apartment, paid for by what was left of Marcus's charity. Derek was in jail awaiting trial, and Sandra was completely alone. Her attorney tried to argue that she was a victim, that Derek had manipulated her, that she had no knowledge of any illegal activity. But the evidence was damning. Photos showed Sandra and Derek together at clubs, at parties, living a lifestyle that was reckless and dangerous. And the police report clearly stated that drugs were found in her personal space. The judge listened to everything, his expression growing more severe with each piece of evidence presented. When it was my turn to speak, my attorney presented not just the police report, but testimonies from Marcus's neighbors who had witnessed multiple disturbing incidents. Loud fights, broken furniture being thrown from windows, Sandra and Derek coming home at 4 in the morning, clearly intoxicated. "Your Honor," my attorney said, standing tall, "Mr. Morrison has done everything in his power to protect his daughter. He has provided a stable, loving home. He has ensured Emma receives therapy and support. Meanwhile, Mrs. Morrison has demonstrated a complete disregard for her own well-being, let alone her daughter's. She has chosen a dangerous partner over her child. She has chosen a destructive lifestyle over responsibility. And now she has exposed herself to illegal activity that could have resulted in her arrest." The judge looked at Sandra. "Mrs. Morrison, do you have anything to say?" Sandra stood up slowly. For a moment I thought she might actually take responsibility, but instead she pointed at me. "This is all his fault," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "He turned my daughter against me. He took everything from me. He ruined my life. I had to find comfort somewhere, and Derek was there for me when no one else was." "So you're saying Mr. Morrison is responsible for your choices?" the judge asked, his tone skeptical. "He destroyed our family," Sandra shouted. "He had no right to take Emma from me." "He didn't take her, Mrs. Morrison. This court removed her from your custody because you locked her in a closet, because you emotionally abused her, because you prioritized your own convenience over your daughter's well-being. Mr. Morrison simply protected his child, which is what any good parent would do." Sandra's face turned red. She opened her mouth to argue, but her attorney grabbed her arm and whispered something to her. She sat down, shaking with anger. The judge didn't hesitate. "Mrs. Morrison, this court has given you multiple opportunities to demonstrate that you can be a responsible parent. You have failed at every turn. Your visitation rights are hereby terminated. You will have no contact with Emma Morrison unless and until you can demonstrate sustained sobriety, stable housing, stable employment, and completion of court-mandated therapy and parenting classes. Furthermore, any future petitions to reinstate visitation will require clear and convincing evidence of substantial rehabilitation. This ruling is final." The gavel came down with a sharp crack. Sandra sat frozen in her seat, her face pale. Marcus, who had slipped into the back of the courtroom despite everything, stood up and walked out without looking at his sister. She was truly alone now. When I left the courthouse that day, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. It was finally over. Emma was safe. Sandra couldn't hurt her anymore. The legal battles, the constant fear, the uncertainty, all of it was done. I drove straight to Emma's school. I'd arranged to pick her up early, and when she came running out of the building with her backpack bouncing on her shoulders, I scooped her up in a huge hug. "Daddy, what are you doing here?" she asked, laughing. "I wanted to surprise you," I said. "How about we go get ice cream?" "In the middle of the day?" Her eyes went wide with excitement. "Absolutely, you deserve it." At the ice cream shop, Emma ordered her favorite chocolate chip cookie dough with rainbow sprinkles. We sat outside in the sunshine, and I watched her enjoy every bite, completely carefree and happy. "Daddy," she said between spoonfuls, "are you okay? You look like you want to cry." I smiled, blinking back the tears that had suddenly appeared. "I'm just happy, sweetheart. Really, really happy." "Me too," she said simply. "Can Jennifer come over for dinner tonight?" The fact that she was comfortable enough to ask about my girlfriend, that she felt safe enough to include her in our life, meant everything to me. "I'll call her," I promised. That evening, as Jennifer helped Emma with her homework and I cooked dinner, I realized this was what family was supposed to feel like. Safe, warm, full of laughter and kindness, not the cold, manipulative environment Sandra had created. Later, After Emma had gone to bed and Jennifer had left, I sat in my home office and looked at the photo of my father on my desk. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for giving me the means to protect her. Thank you for knowing, even when I didn't, that I would need it. You saved us both." I knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. Emma would have questions as she got older. She would struggle with understanding why her mother had treated her the way she did. But we would face those challenges together with honesty and love. And for the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. 6 months passed like a dream. Emma was flourishing in ways I had never imagined possible. She had been chosen for the advanced math program and was the top scorer on her soccer team. Her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, pulled me aside one day and told me she had never seen such a dramatic positive change in a student. "Whatever you're doing," she said, "keep doing it. Emma is thriving." Jennifer and I had grown closer. She was patient, understanding, and wonderful with Emma. We took things slow, but I could see a future with her. Emma adored her, and Jennifer treated my daughter with genuine affection and respect. One evening, Emma asked if Jennifer could come to her soccer game, and when Jennifer showed up with a homemade banner that said, "Go Emma," my daughter's face lit up in a way that made my heart swell. Sandra had completely disappeared from our lives. According to the occasional updates from my investigator, she had moved to Arizona, was working at a department store, and had cut off all contact with her family. Marcus had apparently disowned her entirely after the drug scandal, unwilling to be associated with the legal troubles and embarrassment. She was alone, rebuilding her life from nothing. I didn't take pleasure in her downfall, but I didn't feel guilty either. She had created her own circumstances through her choices, and those choices had consequences. My focus was on Emma and our future, not on the past. One Saturday afternoon in early autumn, Emma and I were at the park. The leaves were just starting to turn golden, and there was a crisp coolness in the air that felt refreshing after the hot summer. Emma was playing on the swings, her laughter ringing out across the playground as she pumped her legs higher and higher. I sat on a bench nearby, watching her with a contentment I had never known before. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hello?" I said. "Richard?" The voice was quiet, hesitant, broken. It took me a moment to recognize it. "Sandra? I know I shouldn't be calling. I know I'm not supposed to contact you, but I needed to say something." Her voice was different, softer, missing the edge of manipulation and anger that had always been there before. I stood up quickly, walking away from the playground so Emma wouldn't overhear. "What do you want?" "I want to apologize," she said, and I heard genuine tears in her voice. "I know it doesn't change anything. I know I can't fix what I did, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I've been in therapy, real therapy, for the past 4 months, and I've had to face what I did, who I was. And Richard, I was a monster to that little girl, to our daughter. She deserved so much better than what I gave her. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to hang up immediately, to protect myself from whatever manipulation might be coming. But another part of me heard something different in her voice, something that sounded like genuine remorse. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked carefully. "Because I've been sober for 90 days. Because I've been working with a therapist who specializes in childhood trauma, and she's made me understand the damage I caused. Because I wake up every single day knowing that I hurt the most innocent person in my life, and I can't live with myself if I don't at least try to acknowledge it, to own it." She took a shaky breath. "I'm not calling to ask for anything. I'm not trying to get visitation or contact or anything like that. I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that if Emma ever asks about me, if she ever wonders why I did what I did, you can tell her that her mother knows she was wrong, that her mother is deeply, profoundly sorry, that her mother loves her, even though she showed it in the worst, most damaging way possible. I closed my eyes, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. Anger at what she had done, sadness for the family we could have been, pity for the broken woman on the other end of the line, and relief that Emma was far away from all of this pain. "What are you doing now?" I asked. "I'm working retail, living in a small apartment, going to therapy 3 times a week, attending support groups. I'm trying to become someone who could look at herself in the mirror without hating what she sees. I'm trying to become someone who might someday be worthy of forgiveness, not from you, not from Emma necessarily, but from myself." "That's a long road," I said quietly. "I know, and I may never get there, but I have to try. I owe her that much. I owe you that much." There was a long silence. In the background, I could hear Emma's laughter as she played with other children on the playground. That sound, so pure and joyful, reminded me of what really mattered. "Sandra," I said finally, "I'll tell her, when she's ready, when she asks. I'll tell her that you called, that you're working on yourself, that you acknowledged what you did. But I want you to understand something. Emma is happy now. She's thriving. She's safe. And I will never, ever let anyone threaten that again, not even you." "I understand," Sandra whispered. "I wouldn't expect anything else. Take care of her, Richard. Give her the childhood I stole from her. Give her the love I should have given her. Be the parent I never was." "I will," I promised. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking, "for protecting her when I wouldn't, for being strong when I was weak, for being the parent she needed." The line went dead. I stood there for a long moment, staring at my phone, processing the conversation. Then I looked back at the playground. Emma had made a friend, a little girl about her age, and they were taking turns pushing each other on the swings, both giggling uncontrollably. I walked back to the bench and sat down, watching my daughter play. Jennifer called a few minutes later and we made plans for dinner. Life was moving forward. Not perfectly, but genuinely. Honestly, safely. That night, as I tucked Emma into bed, she looked up at me with those wise, beautiful eyes. "Daddy, are you happy?" I smiled, brushing her hair back from her face gently. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm very happy. Are you?" "Really happy," she said, yawning. "I love our life, Daddy. I love you." "I love you too, Emma. More than anything in this entire world." "Even more than pizza?" she asked with a sleepy grin. I laughed. "Even more than pizza?" "That's a lot," she murmured, her eyes already closing. As I turned off her light and closed her door softly, I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to her peaceful breathing. I thought about everything we had been through. The discovery in the closet, the battles in court, the fear and uncertainty. The moments when I wondered if I was strong enough to protect her, and I thought about my father, who had given me more than money. He had given me the means to fight for what was right, to protect the innocent, to build a new life from the ashes of the old one. He had seen something in me that I hadn't seen in myself, the strength to stand up and fight, no matter the cost. I walked to my bedroom and looked at his photo on my nightstand. "We made it, Dad," I whispered. "Emma is safe. She's happy. She's everything you would have wanted her to be." Sandra's apology didn't erase what she had done. It didn't heal all the wounds or make the past disappear. But it was something. Maybe one day when Emma was older and stronger, when she had the emotional tools to process it, that apology might mean something to her. Or maybe it wouldn't. Either way, it would be her choice. For now, we had each other. We had safety and love and a future full of possibilities. We had Jennifer, who brought laughter and warmth into our home. We had friends and school and soccer games and ice cream on random weekdays. We had a life worth living. As I climbed into bed that night, I felt a peace I had never known before. The battles were over. The threats were gone. My daughter was sleeping soundly down the hall, protected and loved. And tomorrow we would wake up and live another beautiful, ordinary day together. Because that's what healing looked like. Not dramatic moments or grand gestures, but quiet, steady days filled with small joys and gentle kindness. My father had saved us. And now I would spend the rest of my life honoring that gift by giving Emma the childhood she deserved. The childhood she should have always had. She was safe, she was happy, she was loved. And that was everything.